Welcome back. We're going to continue with the Renaissance story and for the second chapter of the 3 chapters. And this is the middle part. So the first chapter is about warming up. The person is sitting in a square and getting prepared mentally and writing in his notes and start reflecting on his life and on deeper issues. And then he finally, at the end of chapter 1, opens the book, and it's the Inferno by Dante. And then he immediately has this connection to what he's reading. And the last sentence is, the sun was shining warmly and some peaceful birds were gliding across the skies. So now we get the second one, which is about the Renaissance. So, as I read the words of the opening of the Inferno, they were carving out a new place in the mind, and one of deep recognition. I was sitting in a beautiful square with sunshine, a nice fountain, a new espresso by my side, but the experience of the words struck deeply inside. And I had to pronounce them to have the whole feeling of the sentences, how the sounds were opening and creating a first little image or place that the story could grow out from. And the words were these. Nel mezzo del cammin di nostra vita mi ritrovai per una selva oscura, che la dritta via era smarrita. So this means, in the middle of the walk of our lives, I refound myself in a dark forest, that the right way had disappeared, or the right way was lost. There was a rhythm, a form, but most of all an emotion and a visual image that created this first portal to a new world that I knew would contain the fullness of the European history and the culture from the ancient Greeks and Roman times to the beginning of the Renaissance era in Florence. It was a big journey, and the starting point was described in a beautiful poem dense with meaning. I tried to find the right words, how it portrayed a person who was in the middle of the walk of his life and found or rediscovered himself in a dark forest, where the right path had disappeared. I was left speechless for a long time. I lifted the cup and knew well the feeling of being lost without knowing the way out or which path to begin. And I realized that what he described was the loss of orientation, the loss of context, the loss of substance, of foundation, of firmness in the self, of understanding the world on a deeper level. It was a timeless point of recognition in the human mind, when something deep is missing. And this book opened with that I had been thinking about only a few days before. I had been drawn to what I thought was the substance of the story, but at the first line there was a companionship and an explanation to myself why I was reading it. And this was written centuries ago. And I already knew that Dante was not someone from a distant past, but someone with emotions and perceptions of life that was sometimes similar to myself today. It was like I also found a part of myself in these first few seconds of opening the book. I put the book down, lifted the cup, looked at the fountain, and needed to feel the sun over the face again. I closed my eyes and looked up towards the skies, in the middle of life, lost in a dark forest without knowing the path. It still echoed in my mind, and I felt certain that the path would be given or suggested in the pages to come. I looked out at the square again, seeing some people crossing over the middle and someone sitting down on another table a bit away from me. I had already started, and the thoughts of Florence started to appear in my mind too. The city where Dante grew up and lived much of his life, and the times in the 1300s when this work had been created and taken shape. And then I kept reading, being drawn into the poetry, the emotion, and the larger context that was being stretched out in the comedy. The first step had been taken, and now there was no way back. And I felt happy, grateful, and a new sense of love for the book. It was too early to feel these emotions, but it was there. The choice of words and the placement of the thoughts. It was perfection and with boundless beauty. I read the first 2 poems of the book the first day and spent the rest of the afternoon in contemplation. The pilgrim of the story had already met a guide or a teacher for his journey with the Roman poet Virgil from the days of Emperor Augustus, symbolizing the knowledge and history of the classical world and the Greek philosophy. The size of the work was already astonishing to me, The expansion from a lonely moment in darkness to connecting with the ancient times for starting a search was profound beyond belief. And there was already the promise of more substance for my own life and the wish for a broader context or the ability to interpret the deeper significance of the world I was walking in for my everyday life, and of the wisdom and reminders emanating from artworks and historical surroundings. There was already a new dialogue between the book and the present world for me, and this was only after 2 poems. There's not much to add to this. It's very kind of descriptive and it lays it all out. And it's also based upon a real experience of just starting reading Dante and the comedy and having the feeling that it's timeless, that the poetry speaks to you directly as a present feeling. And also just the human dimension of Dante, which is just astonishing. It makes it stand out from so many other works that it's just like you feel the person with you when you're reading it, like with a Dante person. So now the journey has started, and it has already changed. So this is one of the points here, like in between the lines, that once you start a new journey or a process, even after the first step, you're not quite the same person as before you started. So you're not going on this journey that you might have imagined before you started. Like you take one step and then you're in it, and then you have to just continue it. But the next few steps are already influenced by having done the first step. So it's um, it's already the feeling, or it's trying to explain how the person who is in the story now is already um, he will gradually reconsider the whole project also, from being imagination to becoming filled with substance and the reality of reading these stories, or like this poem. So we're going to continue a bit more here. The following day started a bit earlier than usual, with the square more quiet and more tender, and an almost fragile sunlight over the cafe table and little coffee cup. So this is meant to hint towards that things are changing. Like it's a bit earlier, the light is a bit different. The waiter smiled from inside, and it felt like another day of discovery was in front of me. And the blue of the skies was gradually getting more full of color, slowly waking up to the splendor of a full new day. I felt impatient for reading more, and then I was left speechless again, reading the opening of the third poem, as the pilgrim faces the gates of hell, and the inscriptions engraved in the stone. From the beginning, he had seen a shining mountain as the goal of his wanderings, but then had discovered that the way to get there was first through the deeper darkness and circles of Inferno. His guide was with him, but the inscription opened another point of profound insight into psychology and the nature of human emotion. The gate had the following words. So this is in the third poem when they get to the portal into Inferno. There's a big stone gate with engraved words in the stone, which is then in Italian first. Per me si va nella città dolente, per me si va nell'eterno dolore, per me si va tra la perduta gente. Giustizia mosse il mio alto fattore, fecemi la divina podestate, la somma sapienza e il primo amore. Dinanzi a me non for cose create, se non eterna ed io eterna duro. Lasciata ogni speranza, voi chi entrate. So this means, loosely translated, through me you go to the city of pain, through me you go to eternal suffering, through me you go to the lost people. Justice moved my big maker. I was made by the divine power, the total of knowledge, and the first love. Before me, there was no things created that was not eternal, and I am also eternal. And then comes the final point there. Leave all hope behind, you who enter. And this is one of those deep psychology moments where the definition of part of the definition of the Inferno is that you have no hope to ever get out. So it's not necessarily the pain or the suffering, but the lack of hope is kind of the final framing of it and what makes it into like this Inferno. I had to read them several times to get the full extent of the doom they represented. And there were also deeper concepts of wisdom there. It said that the portal leads to a city of pain, eternal suffering, and to lost people. But the portal was also created by divine power, the fullness of knowledge, and the first love. And what struck me the most was the final sentence, that those who enter should leave all hope behind. It resonated deeply, that the loss of hope is the true hell. And once again, I felt the connection to an author many centuries earlier, to the insight into the human mind and the realities of life. And somehow it also changed my view of old writings as more relevant for human life today. This one sentence lifted the ancient and Renaissance worlds into more light and a more vivid and living world to explore further. It was almost like living a bit longer, reducing the distance to history and blending the people from old and current times into a new whole. Like some people from very old times could be closer than other people in my current life. It was a new way of thinking about books, history, and walking around in the streets and observing people, statues, old architecture, and the skies above. The context was already starting to change for me, and it had only been 2 days. With a book over hundreds of years old, and I was already eager to experience the rest of the day with these new thoughts. My eyes had started to change, and a new book was with me. So in this case, eyes is very, very deeply symbolic, like, almost as deep as you can get. That this is his whole way of looking, experiencing, perceiving, and interpreting the world. I felt the sun more strongly over the face as the morning was growing and the mood was changing into the usual habits for morning coffee that week. And then, like waking up from a half-dormant sleep, the right moment came for the sunlight to start blinking in the surface of the fountain, and the angels started to carefully glow, and the fresco over the church door was illuminated in pure colors and beauty. I felt at home again, and I sat in the square for a bit longer. Some moments were there to be felt and expanded in silence. So, a few comments to the last part. This is implicit that it hasn't dawned on the person yet that he sees things differently is because he started reading the book. It takes a little bit longer because now he's just steeped into the new inputs and the imagery and the thoughts and the feeling of the book. But then he sees around him and the world looks a bit different. So this is for, like, when you read it, you understand that this is because something has started to change in the mind of the person. Uh, but not yet for the person. The person is just in it and experiencing it and enjoying it. So there's an implicit feedback that you're doing something right when if you start seeing more beauty around you. It's most likely a good sign that something good is happening within you. So we're going to stop there, and yeah, hope some of this was interesting or inspiring. And as always, thank you for watching, and have a great day.